a lot of detail, kind of like we did with the green, but the cat's got a ton of lights and darks. And how do we make these colors out of the 5 colors that we have? If you're, well, you don't remember, you have them. We have blue, red, and yellow, black, and white. So those are the colors that we have, and how do we mix those other colors from there? So this is kind of basic, but it's super helpful. I do it now, even when I'm painting, I create these color charts to help me. So if you take out that piece of paper that Heidi mentioned to bring, it could be any piece of paper and a pencil. We'll just do these kind of quick exercises before we start in our painting. So we're going to do a couple of them. What I did is I just basically made like kind of a couple of rectangles, and I made sure that I had 6 little squares in my rectangle. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I did, you could do 3 of them. And it's a good chance to just play around with your paint. And color mixing is a super important part of painting. So if you see what I did, I just created, they look like 3 ladders. And a lot of painting, actually all of painting, is really about the process rather than the final product. So this is, again, a fun way to play with your paints. You can also put out your paints. I'm missing my black. So put out all of your paints on your, whatever you have. I happen to have this cute little palette. But if you have a container top, it's fine. Paper plate. And just as a reminder for last week, while you're putting out your paints, there's a variety of brushes that you might have. This is called a flat brush. If you notice, the top looks like a square. It's good for architecture, not as great for landscape. That's one of the brushes. Put it a little closer, flat. This is, I'm just going to show you 2 more brushes. This is in terrible condition, but it is called a filbert. If you notice, it's not perfectly round and it's not perfectly flat. It's like a little bit rounded on the top this way. These kinds of brushes are good for landscape. They're good for what we're doing now, cats, animals, people. So this is a good brush to use. And then my favorite of all brushes is our round brush. You can get a nice point with these brushes. They're round all the way. I'll get you a bigger one so you can even see it. Come in different sizes. So my suggestion today is to use your rounds if you have, or your filbert if you have. And we're going to be doing some detail. So, you know, the smaller the brush that you have, the better. So just to start us off, I think the first thing we're going to do is we're going to mix our yellow and our red, and we're going to create tones from red to yellow and somewhere in between. So you can see that I did this right here. This is my red to yellow. So I have my yellow here, my red here, and everything in between. I start with my red, I add a little bit of yellow, then a little bit more, then a little bit more, a little bit more, until we get to yellow. And again, this will show you what you can do, what you can create with these paints. So the first thing you put down is your red. If you have another brush, I'm going to use 2 different brushes, one for my red, one for my yellow right now. At the top, put down your yellow. And then you guys can have fun. If you take your palette, you take a little bit of red, and then you put in a little bit of yellow. And then you can see it starts to create more of an orange color. These are very important because our cat is going to be a variety of oranges. And then you add a little bit more yellow, and that would be your next box. And a little bit more until you get completely to yellow. And I like doing this because it really tests out the colors for us. And if you don't paint a lot, it also reminds you of what mixes what. So essentially you should have kind of this gradation when you're done. And again, this should just, it's not supposed to be perfect. It's just something for you to look back on later. And just as a reminder, make sure that your brushes, you keep them in your water. Acrylic paints dries pretty quickly. So rinse them off in your water when you're done. Don't let them dry. And when you're ready, you can keep going with this. But the next one that I'm going to do is I'm going to put black on one side and I'm going to put orange on the other side, kind of like a medium orange. So again, I'm going to mix my red and yellow. I'm going to put my orange. And then at the top, I'm going to have my black, because this is a kind of a good way to create browns. Sorry, train. So what I'm going to take for my first color above my orange, I'm going to take just like a dab, barely any. You see at the tip of my brush of black, and I'm going to put it into my orange. And when I mix it, you're going to notice that your orange becomes almost like a little bit greenish, just because the color's in the greenish brownish. And then a little bit more of black. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to create a range of browns. And it gets darker brown. Really dark brown. And finally almost black. Those two colors are very similar. So these are what my kind of tonal charts look like. Red and yellow, orange and black, and then all the range in between. We could actually probably make like 15 ranges in between, but we're going to do some basic ones. I'm going to clean off my brushes again. And then the last one we're going to do, just to have as reference, is orange and white. If I'm going too fast, let me know. But again, this is just an exercise. So when you're ready, you can just move on to the next. On the same thing, take a little bit of white, add it to your orange. And this like practice mixing is really helpful, because then it just becomes second nature. So these charts are something that you can refer to as you're working on your cat. You can also, just to keep in mind, like the way that your colors work, how you create brown. So it's very simple if you add black to create a brown. Just so that while you're working, you can see this. If I were to take my orange and I were to add blue, I would also create a brown. Oops, can't see that. So that's orange and blue. So if you wanted to later, or even while you're working, you could even do this with orange and blue and see the difference between the browns that are created when you use your blue instead of your black. So we'll spend like another couple of minutes on this. While I'm waiting for you guys, I'm just gonna do a blue and orange one so you can see my colors. You don't have to, but you can if you want. And the same way that we did a drawing in the beginning of our cat, we did a drawing of our landscape, we're kind of doing that now with colors, right? We created a map, and now we're creating a map of colors. And our greens and our blues are kind of easy colors to navigate, but I think once you get into browns and oranges and creating kind of these more complex colors, it's better to test them out a little bit. It also reminds you as you're working, this is what I can do. I know how to make these interesting colors just from simple palette. Let's see. Okay, so I did 4. I'm going to clean off my brushes. I'm going to refill my palette. And when we're ready, we can start back on our painting. Again, we have red and yellow, orange and black, orange and white, and orange and blue, and the range that we create. Is everyone okay if I take this away and bring our painting back? You're right, Francesca. All right, so I'll kind of put it up here so you can kind of see. But just as a reminder, we have the tonal scale red to yellow, orange to black, orange to white, and orange to blue. And there's no right or wrong. You're just creating, you know, the variance between like the orange getting all the way up darker to the blue or darker to the black. But I will keep it sort of out so you can see. So the last time we worked, let's get this off of here so you can all see this. The last time we worked, we got through the sky. I think I'm going to turn off this light. Is this glare? Do you see this glare here, or is it okay? Okay. I'm going to test it out without this light on it. So give me a second. We can see if this is better. I want you guys to be able to see this. Is that better? Okay. I tried with the spotlight, and I guess that didn't work. So what we didn't do is we didn't finish this fence. And some of these colors that we created in our tonal scales are perfect for the fence, because the fence isn't necessarily black, right? It's not orange. It's kind of in between brown. And how do we take this brown that we painted and make it darker and make it lighter? So I'm going to take my round brush, because that's what I like to work in. And now I'm going to mix my brown again. And, you know, this is completely dry, which is very nice. But now we want to add some darks and lights. We want to create some depth within what we did. Are you both, Yoshiko and Francesca, we're all caught up, right? We've done the background, we've done, okay. Okay, good. Are you caught up, Yoshiko? Did you do your green, your landscape, and then your backgrounds? Okay, perfect. Perfect. And so if anybody needs help with anything else that you maybe missed last time we were doing this, let me know. And what I can do is I can go over anything that you want to improve. But for now, we'll keep going with the fence. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create that orange. And like I said before, there's 2 ways you can create orange with the colors that we have. I'm not sorry, not orange, brown. You could take your orange and you can mix a little black in it, or you could take your orange and mix a little blue. And that's really up to you. You can see your colors now that you've created. So you pick a brown that works for you. And then we're gonna vary that dark and light with our white and our black. So I'm gonna mix my orange again first. And my paint is already kind of dry that I put down before. I'm going to take a little bit of black. I'm going to put it in my orange. And I created a really dark brown right now, but that's actually better for me for the dark on the fence. So if you've created a color that's too dark, we definitely want to, I'm going to pull over the painting that, like what the fence is going to look like. So if you notice, there's going to be some darks around the cat, shadow, and then there's going to be some light where the sunlight might hit. So you're going to mix, I don't know if you remember from the last time, we created kind of like 2 or 3 colors, a medium tone, which is like the general color of something. Then we always create a light tone, and then we create a dark tone. So this tone right here for me is going to be my dark. It's going to be where my darkest area is going to be. And then I'm going to work towards this kind of medium tone of brown. So I'm going to take my orange again. I'm going to add a little tiny bit of my black. I added too much the last time to create my brown. I'm actually going to use a little bit of blue too, because I like the way that blue looks as a brown. And I'm sure you know from now that this is great. Acrylic paint is great because you can cover right over mistakes. And if I wanted to test my color, so I put my color down and you can see it's very, very light. So I'm going to work and darken that color to almost create the same color that I had down. So I'm re-wetting my painting, or at least that fence. I'm going over a little bit. And when you've got your colors down, what we want to think about now is we want to think about where shadows might be, because that creates dimension. So if I took my darkest dark that I've created, which is almost like a very dark brown, around that cat, there'd be a little bit of shadow. So closer to the cat. And that dark brown would be there. Also, if you're doing trees, fence posts, there's always a dark and a light. Where the sunlight hits, it would be lighter on top. On the bottom where there's shadow, it would be darker. So you can literally take your fence and you could put a line of dark underneath. And if you see that, immediately kind of creates this depth that you want. So dark and light. Your shadows and your highlights are very important in painting because they create depth. So right now I'm just playing with my browns. Again, I'm going to continue. If you see some dark where the cat is sitting, kind of around it, again, that shadow. And this side, the right side of my post is very, my fence post is short. So I'm going to make that dark for now. I'm also going to think down to these fence posts, and I'm going to make them a little bit darker as well. And if there's anything that I want to get rid of that I messed up on last week, I can kind of cover over that and make these straighter. Does anybody have any questions so far? If you think of everything that you do with your painting as creating 3 colors, your general color, your dark, and your light, then you're not going to go wrong. So now that I've kind of got my general color, I do have a little bit of light up here. Oops, that's too light. I'm going to make a light to kind of hit the top of the fence, the same way that like the greens in the mountains, they have some lights where the sunlight might be hitting. We're going to do that on the fence. So I'm going to remix my orange and add, get a brighter brown. And I'm doing that by just putting less blue or less black, and it creates this lightness. And you can also, if you wanted, it kind of makes a duller color, but you can add a little bit of white if you wanted to make a light. And we're going to do that a lot in the cat. And if you see, if I let this light brown hit the top of the fence, it exaggerates it a little bit more. And what I can do is create kind of like a linear pattern to make it look like the wood. So I have some kind of lines so that you see almost like the grain of the wood a little bit, using the tip of my round brush to do that. And when you create lines to create kind of like these, the way the wood looks and the grains of the wood, oops, just got some brown on there. You don't want to have the line necessarily go from one side to the other. You kind of want to vary it. Let the line start and then end and then begin again. You see, I just painted my greenery right here. Oh, I must have done that before. I'll fix that later. So somehow I painted the spot that I didn't want to paint, but again, we can easily fix that and touch it up later. And so these same little lines that I did, I'm going to move this up close so you can really see this. So you see how I put these like lines in to kind of create the grain of the wood. And you could do that going down as well. So a couple of little lines, but think about these posts down here are underneath here, underneath this part of the fence. So they're going to be generally darker. This and this is generally going to be darker than the top of the fence. Because if you think of the sunlight hitting and coming from this way, it's going to hit the top, but not as much on the bottom. But you could still add those details. So I'm going to go ahead and mix my kind of medium tone and put some of these little lines on the bottom of the fence posts. And these are kind of the details that you can have fun with and play around with. If you make a mistake, you go back. And just because I want a little bit more light, I'm going to make it a little bit light on top. I'm also going to put a little bit light on this side. And by doing that, it'll look like your cat is like sitting on this fence post and create shadow. Now I'm going to take a smaller brush because, like I said, the cat is going to have some details that we need some, like, just smaller brush. Is everybody okay if I start moving on to the cat? Or do we need a little bit more time with the fence? I'll wait another couple of minutes for you to work on the fence. And just let me know when you're done. I don't want to rush you. And now you're going to be using a lot of the same colors, the browns, the oranges, the fence, and the cat are kind of, you're using similar mixture and recipe for creating this. So you can clean off your brush, but I wouldn't go too crazy cleaning off your brush. If the color is dragging into your other color and you really don't like it, then obviously clean your brush. But we're using all kind of browns and oranges right now. And I'm just going to continue to add some details to the fence. You can also take a little bit of your red paint and mix it to your brown and make a more reddish brown. When I say brown, I mean the color that you're mixing. And you could put in some red into that fence post. And just that little bit creates more depth, creates more interest. Can you see that? And this will dry pretty quickly. The right side of my fence post is already dry, so I'm going to actually go back over it a little bit, just so that I could do some blending. And sometimes it's nice to paint wet on wet. So, you know, keeping and pushing the paint around and blending it as you put the paint down. And sometimes you just want to have something like a background. It's nice that our background is dry, because then we don't have to worry about going into that right now. And we can always add to it if we want, but our focus is going to be mostly on the cat. So while you guys are still working, I'm going to start mixing my colors for the cat. And the colors for the cat, again, are oranges. All those colors that we mixed, we're going to use those recipes to create our cat. So our cat, I'm going to start off and I'm going to use like kind of a dull orange and paint over what I originally did. I want to create a wet surface for me to paint on top of and to do some blending. So if you can see my orange, it's dull because there's a little bit of blue in there. My brush was a little bit dirty. I'm going to go over what I did. And I think our biggest challenge today will be, as we're working on this cat and putting in details, parts of it are going to dry and we're going to have to remix our colors. And that's why I wanted you to kind of create these tonal charts, because they're going to help you remember how you mixed your colors. So all I did was I added a little bit of light on my cat, again, to bring that color and bring that wetness back. I'm not going to focus on the face right now. I'm going to really focus on the body for now. So once you create this general color of the cat, kind of this medium tone that we were talking about before, I'm going to bring this medium tone back. I'm going to add a little bit of blue and make it a little bit darker, because there's a lot of sections of that cat. Oops, that's a lot of blue. A lot of sections of that cat. We really want definition. And the only way to get definition is through our darks and lights. So you can see I'm using my kind of dirty brush and I'm adding some blue and black to it. And if anybody feels like I'm going too fast or too slow, let me know. It's so different doing this on Zoom because I can't see what you're doing and I can't see if you need me to slow down or speed up. So with the cat, if you remember from the last time, our dark is around where that leg is. My dark is not super dark, but we'll make that darker later. Where the tail is, kind of above the tail. And a little bit towards the neck. We have some darks. And using this kind of wet on wet method is giving me the ability to do blending with my brush. So when I blend, so I just put down this dark line where the leg is. If I wanted to blend, I can take a fairly clean brush and I can go over that line and soften it. And your angle, your line doesn't become sharp, it becomes a very soft shading. The only sharp line I have is where that leg is, that kind of like hump of the leg on the cat. And you'll notice if you take your darker brown and you add a little bit of white to it, the colors will become more beige. So you can again get like this really nice gradation of color. And if your color becomes too beige, then you add a little bit of orange. So the same way that I added dark, now I'm going to add some light. I'm kind of going to go back and forth with this, adding light and then adding dark. So again, you're going to have to kind of remix your colors a couple of times. And think about where, if the sun was shining, if the sun was from above, where would that sun hit? And it would hit kind of the back of the cat. It would hit that leg. It might hit the top of the tail. And I think I lost it. I did have a little foot kind of towards the front of the cat that I've probably painted over at some point. I can get that back in, right towards the front here. This little foot. You can see that right over there. So I'm going to pull this up a little bit. You can see what I'm starting to do. And how this line right here is sharp, and then this is a softened line. And I'm switching right now to my smaller brush, just because we're going to start getting in some details. So I'm going to once again make a dark brown by adding my black. I really want a nice brown. I'm going to start thinking about if this cat was striped, what the stripes would look like. And of course, they're not going to be perfect. I'm taking my black, I'm adding it to my orange. I'm also adding a little bit more red, so it creates more kind of this darker brown. And I'm going to start to kind of put in these little details. Maybe that's a little bit too dark, the color that I just added, but you can see it. I'm going to lighten it a little bit, I think. See, I'm kind of doing these little kind of stripes on the cat. And some of my paint is still wet, which is really nice because some of that orange is kind of absorbing that dark that I'm putting on. It's blending, which is kind of what I want. See, up here must have been more dry because you can really see that sharp line. And if I wanted to blend that, I would go back in with my orange. I'm going to take another brush. So at this point, I'm going to keep two brushes, like a light brush and a dark brush. And that will help me. So again, what you'd have to do if you wanted to blend, like this line got too dark for me, is put it back in my orange. I could blend that, soften it a little bit. So if you think about the cat's fur, it's kind of soft. So this is what I'm using. I'm using this kind of orange color, and I'm keeping my brush wet. And then I've got a thinner brush to do my dark. The other thing is around where the tail is. A lot of these cats have kind of these striped tails. I'm going to do the same thing. The way that I'm doing this is I'm putting a little curved line, and then I'm almost taking little, well, I am taking little lines and pulling out some of those little lines. And it kind of creates the illusion of fur. And I'm going to keep going with that. And creating this like striped tail. Creating almost like little C's in shape. And if I wanted to pull kind of that tail out a little bit, what I can do is I can take that dark line. If you notice what I'm doing, I think I said this last time we met, you can lean your hand down on the painting if you need to steady your hand with these kinds of details. I have a habit of using my pinky because if I'm working, I work a lot in oil paint. If I'm working with oil paint, I only get one little dot of my finger on my painting rather than my whole hand. So you can do that too. It's kind of a good habit to get in. Just put your pinky down and it steadies your hand. I'm getting a dark line underneath that tail. And again, I'm going to go back and forth with my light, my middle tone and my dark. So once I put that dark line in, I'm going back in with my main orange color and I'm kind of softening that a little bit. See that clearly? Got some darks in the tail. I'm going to continue on with my darks. I'm going to make them a little bit lighter, but I'm going to bring it up towards kind of the neck of the cat and create some darks around there. And even towards the side and where that little foot that's sticking out is. I also, those same kinds of lines that I put on the tail and a little bit on the back, I'm going to go ahead and put kind of little dark areas on that leg. Sorry, that's a train. You get the train schedule from here. So I'm going to switch quickly to an even lighter tone. So we've got all these darks down if you're kind of caught up or you know kind of the recipe of what I'm doing here. I'm going to add a little bit of white and create a lighter color. And I'm going to add white to my orange. I want to kind of keep this a little bit brighter. Let's see what the color looks like. It's pretty light. See that right there? And all I'm going to use this for is kind of on the top, the same way that we were talking about before, the way we did this fence, kind of on the top a little bit. I'm going to add a little bit of that light on the top of the tail. So I'll kind of show you what I'm talking about. I'm going to put in a little bit, might be a little bit too light. Let's make it a little bit darker. There we go. Again, remember, if you make any mistakes, it's actually not a big deal because you are going to be able to paint right over it. You see what I did to my tail? Down here, dark, a dark line. You see that kind of middle tone in between. And then on top, a little bit of light. And that's kind of the recipe for most of the cat. So now I'm going to take my light and with a very thin stroke, because things are probably drying on you right now, I'm going to think about, again, if the cat had stripes, what that would look like. So against my dark stripes, I'm creating these little lines of light against the dark stripes. If you watch my brush, how I'm doing, I'm kind of pulling it out and making these little lines. Oops, that one was a little bit too long. Again, if you make a mistake like I just did, let's just go right over it. I also pull out some of that light where the leg is and let the sun, the shadow be on the bottom, light be on the top. And you see how that kind of all these little lines that we're creating, it's starting to give the illusion that it could be fur. It's not that you have to show every single line of fur, obviously, but think about your brush strokes representing how the fur maybe lays on the cat's back. So I've also put some light with this very thin stroke, like around the neck of the cat and where the neck connects, the top of the neck connects to the head. I'm also going to use that white since I have it. I've got this really nice light that I like that's not too much white and it's not too orange, to create a couple more stripes, just kind of on the leg. and pulling out a little bit where the fur of the leg would hit the tail. Again, all of these things, these super little details, is what's going to create depth for you in your painting and make the cat look more dimensional. It's like the challenge of painting. How do you turn something that's 2D, right, flat like a piece of paper, into something that looks like it's three-dimensional? And at this point, the way that I'm working, and this might work for you as well, I have very little paint on my brush. The rest of what I did is dry at this point. It dries super quick, and I'm painting on like a dry background. So my cat, everything is dry. I'm almost like drawing at this point on here. I'm drawing with my light. And this is where you can really play and have fun. I'm kind of creating these little lines like I was before, horizontal lines on the back. Again, creating fur, maybe where the sun would hit the fur. I also realized at this point, if you notice what I did, I have this dark around the leg. I could lighten that up a little bit. It's a little bit dark. And the way I'm going to do that again is I'm going to bring back my orange. I'm going to add a little black to it. And maybe that's a little bit too light. It's kind of fun to play with your paints and play with color. And it's funny, all my colors have dried. So you see how I kind of got rid of that little bit? It was a little bit too dark. I got rid of it by going over it with orange. Well, an orangish brown. And I know I went in already with kind of like a light color. I'm going to even go a little bit lighter in certain areas. Again, the lighter and the darker you get creates your dimension. So what I'm going to do is then think back to your color charts. What's the next lightest that you can create in the palette? So like I'm thinking this right here. You see how I got some lights on there? I'm going to go and add a little bit more light to kind of these little areas. So again, I'm going to go back. I'm going to create my orange. From there, I'm going to add a little bit of my blue or my black, and then I'm going to add white to it. And let's see what comes up with that. Because I don't want to have too much white on the cat. So you can keep some color in there. You can go more red. So if you see that little line that I just did, and I'm keeping it, I'm being very conservative kind of about the amount of light I'm putting on at this point, but a little bit of light at the top. It's really creating that idea that he's sitting in the sun and it's hitting his fur. And again, I'm working on dry. Everything is dry underneath. So these lines I'm creating are on dry paint. And that's why my paintbrush is barely touching my canvas. I'm going to do that on the tail maybe a little bit too. Just adding that little bit. So if you notice, we're really building, right? We started with that flat orange color or orangish brown. Then we added a little bit of dark. Then we added a little bit of light. And now we're taking another kind of level, another tone of light. And when you do that, you don't necessarily want to cover over everything you want to do. You want to cover over like little sections of it, right? Add to it. So I did add this kind of light on the tail before. And now I'm just adding a little bit extra, but a brighter and a lighter color. And I'm kind of going back and forth where I think I need this little bit of white. I'm going to start to move on to the face of the cat. Again, if I'm going too fast or too slow, let me know. But the face, you're going to work very similarly to the body. We're going to add that kind of orange, original orange color, that general orange color. Then we're going to go back in with some darks, and then we're going to go in with some lights. And I have to remix all my colors. So I'm going to put this painting down for a second, and I'm going to remix my colors because everything is dry on my palette right now. Does someone have a question? I think you're just on mute. I'm going to mute you again. But if you have a question, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask, or put it in the chat. Does anyone want to hold up their piece right now and show me kind of where you're at and how you're doing? Hi, Katie. Are you working on a painting, Katie? No? Okay. So again, I'm going to remix my colors. Yep, Yoshiko?
Yes. Could you show me the leg of the cat? Thank you. Okay, thank you.
You see that? Okay.
No.
Right, I'll make sure when I mix my paints, I won't cover over the cat. Yoshiko, are you okay if I move on to the head of the face of the cat, or do you want me to wait a little bit? Do you want me to wait a little bit to move to the face?
Face?
Do you want me to move on to the face or wait a little bit?
Okay. Yeah, go ahead. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm fine. Thank you.
Okay.
Very sort of
Okay. So I filled my palette again with some paint. If you notice at this point, I'm painting on like my container top because I've ran out of room. But I'm going to mix my orange again. And colors, I think the challenging part about colors when you're mixing colors is sometimes matching the colors, right? If you create something and you really want to match what you did. I've just created my dark brown. Now I'm going to work and create a lighter brown. And there's so many variations that sometimes it's very difficult to paint exactly what you had. Now this is, pretty good. So all I'm doing is my face of my cat, I'm going to work the same way I worked with this. I'm going to go over it. You notice my color is a little bit more red than originally, and I'm going to paint over that face so that I can work a little bit wet on wet. And if that shape needs to be changed, oops, let's see, we lost someone and we're going to bring them back. Okay. If the shape of your cat's face needs to be changed, this is the time to do it. Like my face is pretty round, of my cat. So I'm going to make sure that I adjust that a little bit. So now you notice the difference, right? This has a lot of depth. This is super flat. And that's what it's supposed to look like at this point because we haven't added anything to this. So now I'm going to, same way I did with the body, I'm going to start adding some darks on this face before I start adding some lights. And my dark, it's not dark enough. It looks so dark sometimes on the palette, and then we put it on the painting, it's not dark at all. Okay, that's pretty subtle. And I'm going to take a really dark for the inside of the cat's ear. Someone have a question? Nope. The inside of my cat's ear, I'm kind of going to create a triangle. Let's see if I can put this up close while I do this. A dark triangle, at least for base for now. I'm going to do the same thing on the other ear. I'm leaving a little bit of the outer ear. And I'm really going to use this dark and start drawing in the lines on the face as well. And maybe these cats, let's have kind of these lines on the forehead, or a couple of those lines over here. And little by little, you'll see your cat kind of emerging. Oops, Yoshiko, I'm going to mute you. Okay. Okay. Now, before I get too crazy with the face, what I'm going to do is I'm going to work on those eyes. I know we put down a color last week, but I think we can get more detail. So you can see my face is kind of starting to get there, but it needs a lot of work still. I'm going to kind of change gears a little bit with those eyes. I'm going to have my cat, since it's orange, I'm going to have my cat have green eyes. So if you remember, you mix green with yellow and blue. And I'm going to get a little bit of green in there. My lighting is very bad, so hopefully you can see that. And then I'm also going to take kind of complete black paint, and on the top of the eye, so like here, let's see if I can put this really up close for you. You see how that changed a little bit? Actually, it's looking a little scary, the cat, but I'll fix that later. And I'm going to get a little dark iris. Okay. So now my eyes are standing out a little bit more. And I'm just going to touch it up a little bit, and let's see if I can get, oops, too much water. Don't forget to dry your brush before you put it on the canvas. Mixing my green. Going back into the eye a little bit. And then what's really going to pull those eyes out, oops, sorry, is a highlight. And that's super important. It's super important when you do eyes, when you do a lot of things. And you're going to put the highlight and highlight. You see those little details? They're like literally a dot of light. And I took, if you're making your eyes green, I just added some white to that green. So it's not pure white that I'm using. It's like a very, very light green to create that little dot. And that creates the highlight you see in your eye, in your eyes. And the reason why we want to do the eyes at this point is because your eyes, even when you're drawing a portrait, your eyes are set in, right? And then your lids are above it and your face is higher than your eyes. So it's the same reason why you do sky and you go to grass. So background to foreground, same thing when you're drawing a face, whether it's a cat or a person. I'm going to clean my brush off. If you need to at some point get new water, please feel free to do that. You want to clean your brush off in clean water. I'm going to go back to my cat's face now that I've done the eyes. And I'm going to mix the light. This is pretty much the same color light that I have on the body. And that light, just as a reminder, and I know you guys have been mixing these same colors today, I take my orange, my red, and my yellow. I add a little bit of blue to it because I'm going for a more, I like the blue mixed in with my orange. And then a little bit of white to that. And that's going to be my light. If you can see that here, my colors are kind of all mixed together at this point. And the same way that I kind of almost like drew on this painting on the body of the cat, I'm going to do that on the face a little bit. And I'm going to pull out where lights should be. And they should be at the top of the ears. They should be at the top of the head. I'm also going to pull some of that light down because I don't want to necessarily create like a line of light on him or her, but enhance those stripes. So if you put those stripes on the face, you can add light to those stripes. And it must be dry out because my paint is drying super quickly. So I'm going to keep remixing the same color because it's already dried. And I don't love the kind of outline of my cat's face, so I'm going to change it a little bit. I'm using the light to change it. And on cats, normally around their cheeks, they're a little bit lighter. Like the fur, I guess where the whiskers are, is just a little bit lighter. So you can create that area, a little bit of lightness. Also above their eyes, there's usually some whiskers. Sorry, the train again. You can tell life is getting back to normal again with all the trains that are in and out. And if you really need to get a very thin line with your brush, all you do is you put your brush down in your paint and you spin it a little bit. And you're able to get a really nice thin point for a little while. And that's kind of how I'm using my brush. Down a little bit. And you notice how the ears on the top, they've got that light. On the bottom, or kind of the inside, they've got the dark. We can exaggerate that later on as well. My cat's face got a little chubby. That's okay. Also where the nose is, same thing as like your face, the nose is coming out a little bit, so you can add some light on top of that. And if you wanted to create the illusion of some fur, the outside of part of that cat, you can kind of create these little lines, the same way we did on the body, of kind of fur sticking up. And often, again, these are just really tiny details, so it's hard to show it on Zoom, but I just put a line of light right underneath the eye with the really thin part of my brush. And I'm just playing with where kind of those whiskers would be. And I'm going to do the same thing on top of the eye. I'm also going to pull out a little bit of light just on the top of that eye. And that's how you kind of can control the shape of the eye. Because at this point, my cat's eyes are dry, or at least the inside are. And a little bit of light around the mouth too. The cat looks a little bit sad. And again, last week, what we did, or last time we were together, we put in the nose quickly, but we can put the nose back in again. The cat's nose is kind of like a brownish, pinkish color usually, which again, if you want to take your red, add a little bit of black to it. And even a little bit of white. Oops. Then you can create a color for your nose. As a reminder, the cat's nose, you can kind of put it as a little triangle, upside down triangle. And if you need any definition on the mouth, you could also do that at this point, which I would like to do. So my cat doesn't look like it's frowning. What I'm also going to do is use this kind of reddish, blackish color, and I'm going to exaggerate the inside of the ears too, and that's going to really push it back a little bit and make it look like there's a space in there. Maybe that's too black, but oops, sorry, I'm holding the painting up too high. You see how I did that? It really kind of exaggerated the ears. You could even take that dark, and I know I'm going back and forth a lot, so again, let me know if I'm going too fast for you. But I could take that dark and I could again go back over some of those lines of the cat's face that I wanted to keep in. So I'm putting a couple of lines in there and maybe some lines underneath. Starting to look a little bit like a tiger. How's everybody doing on the cat's face? Hopefully we're doing okay. And you notice at this point, I'm kind of going back and forth with my dark and my light, and just make sure to clean your brush so that your darks and lights don't mix. You could also, once you do the cat's face, if you notice there's some details in the body that you need to add, you can do that as well. And I think my cat is nearly done, but I'm going to see if there's any touch-ups that need work on the back of the cat, on the body, on the face. Hi, Katie.
Such a cute cat.
The cat is coming alive. Let's start. It's getting there.
Enjoying the weather.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm going to add a little bit of dark. If you notice on my cat, like my head is kind of blending into the body. If I wanted to change that a little bit, I could take a little bit of my dark brown and define it a little bit. Put a little line there. Let's see, Francesca, how's it going? Oh, you're on mute.
Oh, let me spotlight you, Francesca. Hold on a second.
No, I think it's just done too much.
You know what? Sometimes there comes a point where you're like, that I've done it and that's it. It depends on you. If you want to add more detail, you add more detail. But that is looking very nice. Don't lose your darks and lights.
Okay. Don't know what cat it is, but
It doesn't matter. So Victoria and Anna, how are you guys doing? Hopefully good. If you feel like putting your video camera on, you're welcome to, and you're welcome to show your painting if you'd like. Now, what I'm going to do for the next couple of minutes, you guys can keep working on the cat if you need that. I'm going to add some clouds to my sky, so you are welcome to, if you want to add clouds, add clouds. If you feel like you need to stop with your cat, please feel free to do that, and we could move on. It's also a time, like when you get to this point where your painting's almost complete, it's also a good time to do any touch-ups. If you notice on mine, I somehow painted a brown line on mine, so this is a chance for me to go over that. But I'm going to show everyone how to do some clouds on kind of a dry background. And you can feel free to do that if you'd like. So I'm going to use my blue again. My brush is clean. Add white to it. This might be close to the color of the sky that I have. Oh, see, it's pretty close. Let's move it down a little bit. So now I'm going to add a little bit. So I'm going to have two colors, kind of the color of my sky, and then some light. I'll hold this up a little bit for you guys. And you can start with your clouds being pretty subtle. If you see, like you barely see them, and that's what you want at first. You kind of want to have this very subtle cloud. I'm going to put one cloud here, kind of using lines. I guess they're more like, what is that, cirrus clouds, those kind of thin clouds. So I didn't want to take like white directly and put white right on there. I'm going to build to that. So I'm going to start with this. And now I'm going to add, same thing the way that you're doing the tones, that we did the tones earlier. It's the same thing with your blues. Take now a little bit lighter. I'm going to think of where the sun might hit, right? If the sun's coming up from here, usually the tops of the clouds are lighter. And again, it's just building. Maybe it'll end up being a little bit darker in some areas. Maybe that one's a little bit too pointy, so I'll bring that out a little bit. Make it just a different shape. And then I'll work on this one that I started over here. And I'm kind of doing these like diagonal, like little tiny diagonal lines to create my clouds. And again, if I really wanted to exaggerate that cloud on the top, I'm almost taking, oops, that's too bright. Mix a little bit of blue with that. Taking a brighter white, still mix with my blue, and just at the top, making a little bit lighter again. Then we lost somebody, they must have been done with their painting. And so here are some simple clouds. If you wanted to add a little one over on the other side, just to balance it out, we can do that. I'm going to get lighter, do the same thing I did with the other clouds, right on top, some little details that are lighter. And there's some kind of clouds in the background. And if you're done with your clouds, the last thing to do is to sign your piece. And if you're still working, you can still sign your piece if you're done with that section. Now, when you sign, what you should do is you should use a color that's in your painting. We always sign on the lower right or the lower left corner, obviously not too close to the edge, but give yourself enough space. On my painting, because I've got these details on the right side, I think my signature is going to go kind of along the fence line. And I think the best color probably to do it in for me is like this orangey color, because you don't want it to stand out too much. You want people to see who did it, but you don't want your signature to be the only thing that people are looking at. You want them to look at your painting. Signing is, I think, always a challenge, but the way you do it is the same way you were getting the details in on your cat. Mix your color. Again, I'm going to mix an orange. Roll that brush. So roll it in your paint so you can get a nice thin tip to your paint brush. And you can sign however you want. I sign my name with just a J and a C and then kind of a line dot. So you can't really see it that much, but I didn't really want mine to be, I don't know if you can see it at all actually, but there's a little bit of it. So Yoshiko, did